Good afternoon and welcome to the Law and Crime Network. I'm Angelica Spanos. Thanks for joining us today. We are following two live trials this afternoon and have a lot to update you on. Right now in Tennessee, the first witness in the trial of Tennessee versus Roy Coons is on the stand. You're taking a live look right now. That is the victim of this trial's mother, Patricia Velasquez. Roy Coons allegedly sexually abused her daughter, 12-year-old Johanna Ortega, and strangled her to death. We want to take you there live right now as her mother is on the stand, very emotional in her testimony. All right, so again, that was the victim's mother, Patricia Velasquez. You are looking live right now at the trial of Roy Coons versus Tennessee. Joining us today to break this all down, we have two guests, Joseph Scott Morgan, a forensic death investigator, and Ann Bremner, trial attorney. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thanks.
Good day. How are you?
Great. So as you know, this was the state's first witness that they called up to the stand. And obviously, it's always powerful when you have a parent of the victim in court and then, of course, testifying. So starting us off here, what'd you think of that? Joseph, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, Angelica, it's good to be with you today. The first point of order here is not only is this child's mother, but what is essential to remember here is that this poor woman is the first eyes on scene. That is that she sees this in its original context. So she's breathing life into this from the stand, which is essential. That's why they're having her go down this list and identify these images, the disc that she from the initial recording from the 9/11 call. So this is very important. And
Ann, what'd you think?
Well, first, it's great to be on with you and always with Joseph Scott Morgan, the great Joseph Scott. Hi. And, I think it's primacy recency. When you come with the mother in the very beginning, you're, pulling at emotional heartstrings with the jury. And they kind of start with the opening statement and the first witness and then filter everything else that they hear in the trial through that lens, which favors, of course, the prosecution.
All right. And when we see, as you said, the prosecution called the parent, Joseph, you touched on this a little bit. It's not only to be emotional, but as you said, she's the first person to see this scene. And one of the interesting things with this case is we don't really have any other witnesses. We don't have a neighbor that heard anything. We don't have someone who has any really insight into this aside from her. So why do this first?
Well, I think that you have to establish what was seen at that moment in time, and this is very, very powerful stuff that many on the jury are going to be able to appreciate. You've got this woman who is on the stand that's literally painting this picture of all that remained of her daughter, this child that she had raised all of these years, and here she is on a pile of clothing. She apparently has suffered this fatal event, and she's even going into a descriptor about wiping the blood away from this child's ears, and that kind of hits the jury in the chest like a 10-pound sledgehammer at that moment in time. It really focuses. It makes them focus. Some of these other witnesses that you're going to hear from DNA scientists. Although that is powerful in and of itself, nobody can paint a narrative like a broken-hearted mother.
And you obviously knowing a lot about DNA and forensics here, when you walk up to a body like this or a scene like this, what are the things that what are the things you could say she saw, and how really horrible is that for her as the mom?
Well, I think that one of the things that the police and the prosecutors trying to establish here is, they talked about what did you do with the body? Because that's so important. They want to know if the body's been manipulated. The mom talked about moving this child's head and all these sorts of things. And that has to be brought up because you get an idea. I'm sure defense is going to come back and say, well, we don't know whose DNA was there. And it was potentially compromised, these sorts of things. But I think that they're going to have a pretty tight scientific case here.
All right. And Ann, before we take a break here, as Joe just mentioned, we do have DNA a factor here. But what could the defense what direction could they go in to sort of rebuttal this DNA evidence that's present?
Well, first is like what we've seen in a lot of trials, including the O.J. Simpson case. You end up shredding it and addressing or attacking the messenger, the gathering. I mean, compromise in the lab, everything else. But here's the thing they have, which is he'd been there before. He says he'd been there before, so it was a legitimate reason for his DNA to be there.
All right, Ann, thank you so much. Joseph, thank you as well. All right, so there you just saw live in that courtroom, Patricia Velasquez standing up off the stand. We're told that they are going to take a quick break. So let me bring in my guests here, Joseph Scott Morgan, as well as Ann Bremner. You guys, what we saw so far, obviously very powerful testimony because this is the victim's mother. What's your initial reaction here? Joe?
Well, again, I have to go back to this idea of a mother's heart on the stand here. She's taken care of her family for all of these years. And here she has an awareness that this creepy guy is in their neighborhood. And I can only begin, to imagine how horrible this is for her because, as a parent, you're thinking all along, is there something I could have done to have prevented this? And you can see that grief just emblazoned across her face here. She's on the stand, and it's powerful, powerful stuff, Angelica.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the other things we know about this is that Coons lived about 2 doors away from this family. He was a neighbor. He cut their lawn and things like that. Do you think that there was maybe some trust here and that there is an element of any premeditation here, Ann?
Well, I think that we don't have forced entry. He lives 2 doors down. He's in the neighborhood. He's had contact before. And so, premeditation, they said it's a very brutal murder. The medical examiner did it. Joseph Scott can speak more to that, of course, than I can as an expert. But, that's something the defense can argue, saying that there wasn't premeditation in this case.
And when we have a mom testifying in this situation, and obviously very emotional, how's that work to the state's favor here?
Well, the state's got to have an emotional case, and the worst thing that can ever happen to a parent is the loss of a child. Everybody knows that. And so every juror on there, whether they have kids or not, their hearts are going out to this mother. What a horrible, horrible thing, especially a brutal homicide when she's the one that finds the body and she's the one that feels responsible. It doesn't get any worse than that.
Exactly. All right. Well, we're talking about how the mom found the body. Let's play you that clip from her on the stand from earlier. So that has to be one of the most sad and horrific things to hear. We listened to Patricia there talking about how she found her daughter's body. Joseph Scott, let me bring you into this first. What goes through your head when you hear that? And it's just awful. It gives you goosebumps almost.
Yeah, and it takes us back in time to that moment because you can hear the horror in her voice at that moment in time when all of this went down, which is very sad, and it is horrific, because she's not just balancing what she's seen in her daughter's bedroom with her daughter now gone, blood coming from her ears, unresponsive. She's even trying to determine how to clear her airway. But then her thought flies to this idea that she's got 2 other unprotected children, and there might be some animal on the loose out there that could do harm to them. So how does she go and interdict this situation while she's still trying to deal with this unresponsive daughter? And you can see how the walls close in here and how horrific. I think what's going to be key here is that the prosecution really emphasizes this with the jury and helps them along the way to encourage what this woman is feeling.
Right. And we also know that there was photos that were shown to the jury. These were photos of the bedroom in the home, specifically the bathroom there of what you would call the master bedroom. We can't show you those because they are near the jury, but why bring in those photos? Why show those to the jury?
Well, you want to bring it home for the jury. And it's interesting with, gruesome homicide scene photos. Oftentimes you hear defense attorneys saying, I object. It's just, it's going to inflame the passions of the jury. They're too horrific, et cetera. And time again, the appellate courts say, this is what you need to show. You need to paint the tapestry of what happened there. every once in a while the court will say, you know what, this one was too gruesome. Maybe it's a fire, maybe it's, really, horrific photos. But they need to set the scene. They need to get the jury to see this is what happened. It happened in this house. This is the horror this girl went through before she died. She's a girl. She's somebody's child. And he brutalized her and murdered her.
All right, Ann Joseph, thank you so much. We have to take a quick break. Stay with us here on the Law and Crime Network.